So my advice to anybody out there is like, know your why. Again,
Yeah,
but really know why you wanted to join product. Because if
sure.
you what you're joining is like, oh, I feel like this is a very sexy job because a
Yeah,
lot of people talk about it, right? It's very
yeah.
exciting. I got to make decision about the product roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
That might not be a good motivator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also a really hard job. So
For
I
sure.
think you need to love making things. You're a
Yeah,
maker, for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
And then there are a lot of different personas for product manager, right? You have
yeah.
to wear a lot of hats when things don't go well. You are the connective tissue, so you have to hold everybody out. You're gonna have to work harder than everybody else in your team. And are
For
you
sure.
willing to sign up for that?
Hey everyone. How's it going? Hope things are good in your end. And welcome everyone to our first LinkedIn Live event. Today we have the privilege of hosting Shyvee, who is a product lead at LinkedIn. So it's again a great privilege to have someone from LinkedIn and doing a LinkedIn Live. So it's like uh, sort of a dream sort of going around. All right, so but then just to give a quick introduction about Shivi, and then we can probably start talking to her. But then, like, if you are into the product world and you are on LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure you might not have like there would be a very less chance that you might not know her. But just to give you a background, with the wealth of experience in product management, Shivi has done some incredible work in the industry, and also because she has been sharing a lot of stuff for people like us who are into product and inside product management. And also she brings in a lot of people and host them on way of content in terms of writing or in terms of hosting people on by going live. She has also sort of gained like around 100,000 followers. I think it is more than that. And the best part is she recently co-authored a book which is reimagined building products with generative AI, which is hardcore sort of going inside the world of generative AI. And like what are some of the product strategies that you can bring in when you are implementing AI, and even in terms of career development and sort of things that she has written over there. I'll just quickly begin with, hey Shivi, how is it going, and how was your day like today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really honor.
Okay.
So it's really good to be here with
Sure.
you all, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I have the book handy just in case if I forget something,
Absolutely.
I have my cheat sheet to go
For
back to.
sure. For sure.
But yeah, doing well. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to dive in. For folks who don't know me, just some quick fun facts. I guess I've been working at LinkedIn for about 6 years now. Prior to that, I was a consultant working on various, digital transformation project. I did a lot of product work, even as a consultant, but you never get that title. I don't know if
Yeah.
India has that problem, but certainly in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And then I joined LinkedIn roughly about 6 years ago.
Sure.
I first started working on more like tools for salespeople, internal tools, helping them gain insight on identifying opportunity areas to sell in the CRM or customer relationship space. And then about 4 years ago, I moved into our R&D team focused on LinkedIn Learning.
Nice.
So I did a number of roles in, platform, search and
Yeah.
discovery, venture back, growing 0 to 1 product. That's
Perfect.
when I start to build my audience on the site as like dog fooding my own product
Yeah.
and see how we can grow audience using LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's been a really fun journey. So I
Yeah.
tested a full suite of our product, right,
Yeah.
from post to live streaming.
Yeah.
So I have
For
my own
sure.
live show supported by the PM Learning Series, which is a newsletter with now
Yeah.
over 60,000 subscribers globally.
Perfect.
It's been a real joy to do that. And then the last year and a half, I've been focused more on the job side
Yeah.
to help SMB or small and medium sized business to
Yeah.
grow, to hire better on LinkedIn. And then the last year, focus on growth, unlocking new area of growth
Sure.
from the segments that don't really use LinkedIn today. So we're
Okay.
thinking about healthcare,
Yeah.
nurses, or teachers. So figure
Interesting.
out a strategy that will allow us to tap into that market. And the last
Yeah.
6 months have
Yeah.
been actually more than 6 months, maybe 8 months. It's
Mm-hmm.
been really fun working with generative AI, learning about generative
Yeah.
AI, and writing the book. So really excited to be here today. and share
Perfect.
more about, what I learned and
Yeah.
some of we have, I forgot the stats all the time, 150
Yeah.
real life examples and
Yeah.
30 case studies,
For sure.
20 plus frameworks. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's more like a reference book.
Yeah.
So I hope we can touch upon some of the basic stuff
For sure.
and
Yeah.
some of the core concept during today's show.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there are like bunch of these questions that also has arrived while I was prepping as well, right? Because obviously generative AI is the space that everyone is trying to adopt, and like everyone is looking for a mental model of how do we go about it, because suddenly there is a pattern change and things like that, right? So and yeah, a bunch of people have a lot of questions around that. But to begin with, right? Like I mean, you have been helping a lot of people to transition towards product management. Maybe we can start over there, right? So you have been, like sort of, there would be 100 plus people who might be, looking at your content, and even you have sort of helped out with a lot of people transitioning from let's say they are into the tech background, but they want to like move towards product because they understood there's some skills that they have, right? So one of my questions usually has, and like a lot of people also come to me like, how do we pivot to PM, right? So what are some of the patterns that you've seen on someone who is switching from, let's say, a tech role? They might be working in a tech company but want to move towards let's say being a PM. What are some of the patterns that you've seen and you want people to understand, like like these are some of the basic things that absolutely you need to do it, and that will at least get started. Like if you could just probably start with that.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I help probably, I don't know, thousands of people transition
Yeah,
into product at
absolutely.
this point, right? Some of them individually, some of them in a group setting, and myself being a pivoter.
Yeah,
So you asked about technical background. I think that's
sure.
great.
Yeah,
So usually when I think the type of people that transition into product are usually
yeah,
coming from three backgrounds. One
yeah,
is technical, so you were a developer or engineer before.
sure.
Second is strategy, where you're like a business ops or corporate strategy. So I fall into roughly that bucket.
Yeah,
And then the third bucket is kind of like, you're in marketing or user research where you have deep empathy, or you're a salesperson where you interface a lot with your customer. So you have deep understanding of the user needs. So
yeah,
different group are going to face a slightly different stereotypical
yeah. Got it.
bias,
Yeah,
stereotypes,
yeah,
right, that you need to overcome.
yeah,
So the first thing that if you're a technical person trying to
yeah,
transition into product,
yeah,
the first thing I would say is that you would check the box of how to work well with engineers, which is a major part of a PM's job,
sure.
especially if you're early PMs. Then you probably spend a good like 50% of your time
Yeah,
working with engineers, right?
execution, because
Execution,
execution.
yeah, nailing out what
Yeah,
can actually be done. So
yeah,
people are not going to question you that. But if you're
yeah,
coming from the other two background, you will get challenged of
yeah,
like, did you have the technical expertise to work well with engineers? So
yeah,
depending on which swing. So
yeah,
again, if you're technical, then people are not going to challenge you that, but they're going to challenge you two other things,
yeah,
which is two other. I talk about the three personas, right?
yeah,
So they're going to challenge you about your big strategic thinking. Can you
yeah,
think big picture,
yeah.
especially around vision for a product as well as prioritization? So if
Sure.
you're a junior PM, like strategy and vision, these kind of stuff you can build on the go.
Yeah,
Like you can ace the interview and still
yeah.
like not super great in strategy, and you have
True,
years to kind of build
true,
that up.
true.
But a really good skill set to have right off the bat is prioritization.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times engineers focus on like, oh, what's the edge case? Like,
yeah,
they need to plan out all this like scenario,
yeah,
like fallback mechanism.
yeah,
But in product, whether to invest in a project or not,
yeah,
it's like if you're choosing investment
yeah,
portfolio, right, for
yeah.
your personal income,
For
with the
sure.
exception that you don't have an ETF or something,
Yeah,
ETF is in the US, like an
yeah, yeah.
index fund,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
You invest in the market. You
Correct.
don't have that, and you have to pick
Yeah.
like individual stocks.
Sure.
Assuming each stock is like a product feature, so
Yeah.
how do you know which one is going to get you the biggest
True.
return by the end of the
True.
year, right? So
True.
you kind of
Absolutely.
have to embrace this kind of like prioritization.
Yeah.
So so that comes down to like, do you know the bigger picture? Like how is it going to help you drive business metric, drive user
Yeah.
impact? What's the cost of doing that? How many
Yeah.
people you're going to impact, right? So answering those questions and do it in the fastest, most efficient way so that
Yeah.
your time and your team's time is always spending on the highest ROI, return on investment item. So that's number
For sure.
one, right?
Yeah.
Like the big picture thinking, the prioritization. The second piece is usually technical. People also get challenged is your user empathy, which
Yeah.
someone who works in sales, for example, or
Yeah.
customer success or design or
Yeah.
marketing will have more because they interact more
Yeah.
with the user. So a lot
Correct.
of times this comes down to like, are you able to answer the basic question? Like,
Sure.
what is the job to be done?
Yeah.
I actually really hate that name, but I
Yeah.
really like the framework.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people
It's
don't
it's
know
very
what is job
simple
to
to
be
say.
done.
Yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
very
really
simple to
mean.
say. Correct. Correct.
Yeah, what does it really mean?
Yeah.
That means what is the goal or the
Yeah.
problem that the user is trying to solve?
Sure.
And why is your product the right solution? I think it sounded very simple, but it's a whole
Yeah.
art and science to really
True.
figure it out.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to get into the detail, but if you
Yeah.
don't know the concept,
Yeah.
research milkshake case study from Clayton Christensen, who's a
Oh,
Harvard
nice.
professor who passed
Okay.
away. But that was a really brilliant case study to illustrate how McDonald's like boosts
Yeah.
their milkshake sales,
Oh,
not
interesting.
by having more flavors of
Yeah.
milkshakes.
Yeah.
Because an engineer, I think, will come up with that first idea. I'll build more
Correct.
flavors: strawberry, cookie,
True.
peanut butter, right? All
Yeah.
of these.
Yeah.
But by really understanding who's buying the milkshake when,
Yeah.
for what
Yeah.
purpose, right?
Sure.
You'll unlock new opportunity and new
Mm-hmm.
insight. So that's a really good case study that I think everybody should check it out if it's a foreign thing to you. It's also
Sure.
covered in my book as well.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good. Sounds good. No, I think that totally makes sense. I think if I mean you can clearly see like how a problem solving would happen for an engineer versus someone who is as you said like people who are like constantly talking to customers. You know what they want and you develop that sense of like okay, this is what my users are talking about and probably I can go back and tell to my team. But with that said, like what does your product management journey essentially started with? Like I was also trying to find out, I'm not sure where and when you would have talked about it, but just a general idea of how was your journey sort of gotten into, let's say, in product management.
Yeah, happy to share. And I think
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of learning there too.
Yeah.
So I started out, I back in undergrad, I studied business, right? Finance,
Perfect. Okay.
economics. I didn't know what product was. And
Yeah.
so but I was always fascinated about technology and business.
Sure.
So I just like wanted to find a job at the intersection of the two.
Right.
So I joined Accenture, which is kind
Yeah.
of like an IT business consulting firm on the strategy side of the business. So the first 3 years of my career, I helped implemented a lot of digital strategy. So I was helping to implement like Salesforce for one of
Yeah.
the largest retailer in Australia.
Sure.
I was defining a detailed retail digital, strategy for a Louis Vuitton, like a company under Louis
Yeah.
Vuitton, LVMH, right? And then I also help a bank,
Yeah.
in the UK, implement
Okay.
kind of like thinking through their digital banking strategy,
Sure.
like what it would look like to bank with, that was over a decade ago, by the way. So there's no Venmo, no PayPal, like even PayPal is super new, I think.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so I did a lot of that, and then I went to business school to pursue kind of like a joint degree in design thinking / engineering
Perfect.
and business. But even then, I started to learn about product management, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to get in because.
Yeah.
So the first mistake I made, again in retrospect, was that I did 2 coffee chats
Okay.
with former product managers who did an internship, not like real
interesting.
product manager,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
like people who were a year ahead of
Yeah.
me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they did 2 internship, right? So I talked to them. I said, "What did you do during your internship?" And they told me they designed this one button. I'm like, "No, thanks. I don't want to do a job that designed one button, right?" So I kind of like just
True.
rejected that. And then
Yeah.
I also talked myself down. I
Yeah.
was like, I didn't study engineering. Maybe I'll hit a ceiling. Maybe I won't be
Yeah.
that good.
Yeah.
I talked a lot about stuff that I thought it would be hard to,
Yeah.
to put myself down. I think this is the biggest lesson I learned over the course of my career for any pivoters in particular, especially in today's market, like a lot of big techs are
Yeah.
laying off people
For
and
sure.
stuff. I think you have a lot of self-doubt, right? You're gonna talk yourself down. You're gonna make up all this excuse that you might not be
Yeah.
a good fit. in order to put yourself to stay on your current status. At the time, I was really good with PowerPoint slide. I
Yeah.
was really good with strategy.
Sure.
So I thought, this is what I'm good at. Maybe I should
Yeah.
just stay, even
Yeah.
though my heart keep telling me I need to go this other path. So it took
Yeah.
me about back and forth, I think a good 2 years,
Yeah.
2 to 3 years before I really committed. Like, you know what? No, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Had I had that conviction and courage a little sooner, I
Sure.
think my product journey would go even
Would have
further.
been correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, so my advice to anybody out there is like, know your why. Again,
Yeah.
but really know why you wanted to join product. Because if
Sure.
what you're joining is like, oh, I feel like this is a very sexy job because a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about it, right? It's very
Yeah.
exciting. I get to make decision about the product roadmap. That might not be a good motivator, right? Because it's also a really, really hard job. So I
Sure.
think you need to love making things. You're a
Yeah.
maker, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of different personas for product manager, right? You have
Yeah.
to wear a lot of hats when things
Sure.
don't go well. You are the connective tissue, so you have to hold everybody up. You're gonna have to work harder than everybody else in your team. And are
For
you
sure.
willing to sign up for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You might not get paid that much
Yeah.
more than your engineers,
Correct.
but you're
Correct.
gonna
Correct.
work a lot harder than your
Yeah.
engineers.
Yeah.
So just knowing some of that and know your why, right? Like know
Yeah.
what's the next job. If your next job or your future job is trying to be a founder, for example, product is a really great job to prepare for you
Absolutely.
for that. If your
Absolutely.
next job is to be a general manager for a business that's owning PML, like profit
Yeah.
and loss statement,
Yeah. Yeah.
product is a very good job for that.
For sure.
But if your next job is like, oh, I just want like a good enough work-life balance job that makes good enough impact,
Yeah.
product might be too hard for you.
True.
There
True.
are other
True.
ways you can do that, right? Or if
Yeah.
you really like, let's say, research user insight,
Yeah.
or you don't like the nitty-gritties of negotiating with engineers, fighting for your
Correct.
scope, fighting for your
Correct.
resources, putting up with politics, maybe research or marketing might be a
Yeah.
better job for you.
For
So
sure.
really know your why and don't chase it because it's like you feel like it's a sexy job. I can also tell you in the US,
Yeah.
last Christmas I read, so this past Christmas,
Yeah.
I read CNBC said that the number one job that most American wants to quit that pays, 6 figures
Yeah.
is product management.
Okay. Okay.
So
Got
be
it.
prepared.
Yeah, that's how the background essentially looks like. I mean, you actually rightly said, right? Like it would look like it's pretty sexy. Everyone is talking about it, but the end of the day, you are the first one to wake up and probably figure out what I need to talk to these folks, and then you end up at the end. You are also figuring out, okay, what did I actually speak, and then what I need to build next. You're prepping before talking to anyone, or even So there's a lot of to and fro also that you do. I think the best part about this whole thing is that you are the communicator, like you are the center part of that concentric circle of tech design and business, and then you are the one who are communicating each of these folks. So yeah, it totally makes sense. Like it might look good from outside, but it's a lot of work that you need to put in for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I one of the analogy that I like to use is that
yeah.
you are the conductor of an orchestra, right?
Okay,
So
got it.
you
Makes
have a lot
sense.
of people playing different instrument, which
Exactly.
you don't actually know how to play.
Yeah.
But then you
True.
create the masterpiece
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah, you're
because you're
creating
the
that
one
harmony. Yeah.
right. So there's a lot of fun in doing product, but it's like raising a baby. It's
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. So make
Yeah.
sure you're prepared for it. And really ask yourself, like
Yeah.
especially in today's market, it's really hard to transition, right? It's getting harder and harder because more and more
For sure.
people
Yeah.
wanted to join. And then with a lot of AI that's coming out,
Yeah.
people are also getting scared because
Yeah.
engineers can do a little bit of product too, or designers, or this and
Yeah.
that. And with Airbnb shaking up sort of the
Yeah.
product function, it's not actually getting rid of product management per se. I don't read
Yeah.
it so literally, but
Yeah.
it's more like the function is the connective tissue,
Yeah.
right? So it's sometimes really hard. Like my mom still don't know what I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
It's as simple as
it's
that.
it's hard to explain. Also, like it's pretty much sitting in between of literally whatever is going on in the company, and then figuring out how all of this is basically working.
Yeah.
No, totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And coming to the next question, right? I think there's a lot that you said in terms of how PM function in general works and what does the mental model look like, right? And you also talked about how you used LinkedIn to dog food with the products that you were also building, right? So just wanted to understand, like, let's say some of the things that you have done, like for example, 100 Day LinkedIn series, and then there are a couple of other things that you do. Is it like what did really motivated you to start sharing something around on LinkedIn? And one of the things could be dog fooding as well, as you said. One is what is motivating you to keep sharing all of this, and what is the biggest importance of actually dog fooding your own product? Like, take me through that journey of how you sort of came up with content and started using LinkedIn and actually working on LinkedIn. And also obviously because you might be using the tool, so you're playing the character, you're playing the role of your own user, and then again going back, which is basically the best spot to be in. Would love to know what's your thought on start using your platform the way your users might use, and also what is your motivator to sort of keep coming back and sharing these things on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think I'll answer in two-part. One is
For sure.
my intrinsic, you asked about intrinsic motivation to share,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
how that plays into a role and the unique role that LinkedIn plays.
Yeah.
I think the second part of the question is like, assuming it's not LinkedIn, it's some other
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Should you be
Forget.
dog fooding? How should you be
Yes.
dog
Yes.
fooding?
And how should it be? What does the method
Yeah,
look like? Yeah.
because LinkedIn is actually quite different, right?
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
so. Personally, I think for me, I think, I thought a lot about my career being, especially being a pivoter, like many of maybe your question alluding
Yeah.
to. You
Yeah.
have years of experience building up to this point. You weren't
Sure.
like any other APMs or
Yeah.
associate PM that got so lucky
Yeah.
that product was their first job and they kind of rise up the rank really fast.
For sure.
I feel like I had to make, quite a bit of trade-offs, learning about myself, overcoming imposter syndrome, all of those things I spent so much time thinking about. And I thought, you know, I could share that and help more people. So I was coming from like the joy of like, I spent so much time prepping for product mock interview, right?
Yeah.
So, spending so much time thinking about my career, thinking about all these hard lessons about, man, like I would talk myself down. I'm the problem who's not committed. Like to make that, like
Sure.
a lot of times we have a lot of personal doubts, personal.
Yeah.
It's all part of the umbrella of imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
So I liked it to share what I learned to the world, but then also what I get in return, besides helping others, is creating optionality for myself. So, for example, I build more visibility both internally and externally, right? I was during COVID, like you don't go into the office anymore.
Yeah.
So when I joined product, I didn't have any relationship with my, like executive level.
Yeah.
So how do I create more buzz
That's
about like
brilliant.
visibility about myself and my,
Yeah.
my work, but then also create opportunity in case, if I wanted to, try something on my own eventually, or,
Yeah.
go to play a bigger role at a smaller company or whatnot, I have a lot of options by putting myself out there. So I read a lot about different newsletters people write, like people know about Lanny, for example, and a
Yeah.
lot more other
Yeah.
people. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh, how can I be more like them?
Yeah.
So that was the intrinsic motivation around just creating the optionality for myself and the pure
Yeah.
joy of sharing, knowledge, and helping others. A lot of people reach out and say, my content has impacted them. So it helps
Yeah.
me. Last
Yeah.
year, though, it was a little harder to keep up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the previous year, I had a lot of fun just doing that. And obviously, I built my own course from it, which is part of LinkedIn
Sure.
Learning. So I learned how
Yeah.
to grow. So I think that comes to the second question of like, how should
Yeah.
you be dog fooding the product?
Yeah.
I think first, ideally you work on a product that you care about, or you are the
For sure.
ideal target customer, right? If
Absolutely.
you're working on a product that's not like what I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
growing nurses in healthcare and teachers on LinkedIn, I'm not the target audience.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
need to expose myself more in their
For
shoes
sure.
by observing what they do, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. But if you are, let's say, if you're a Notion product
Yeah.
manager and you work on Notion,
Yeah.
right? Or something around productivity,
Yeah.
then it's really great that you try to do everything and you start to get a lot more empathy
Yeah.
Around like a lot of the power user use cases,
Yeah.
how people figure things out.
Yeah.
It's the best form of user research,
Yeah.
but it still does not replace user
Yeah. Yeah.
research.
Of
It
course.
just
Of
get
course.
you a little bit more acute about the
For
pain
sure.
point of certain problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
or where the problem is coming from, the
Yeah.
context around a
Yeah.
certain problem, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times salespeople will come to you and say they want this feature, and you kind of lose like the story behind why do they want that feature, what is it for. So you wanted to know the context, and dog fooding your own product will give you that full story, but it does not replace user research, because you might not be representative of your average user. There's no such thing as average user, right? So you don't know, are you representing the power user, are you representing someone who's new? You need a fresh mind, right? A lot of onboarding challenges. Now that you're a power user, you might know a lot of hacks that were not obvious to people. So you need to constantly sort of putting on your beginner's mindset, beginner's eye, to see new problems. But dog fooding the product really gives you just a little bit more. I would say don't just dog food your product. Like try to like use competitors' product too, especially if they're like far ahead of yours. Then you get a lot more insight about why are things, the little things that might or might not work well.
No, true, true. No, totally makes sense. I think sometimes even when you're using a product, you would be able to know, like, okay, you know, like on a daily basis, if you're using your own product, you would be also know that okay, something which is already built. What are some of the cases that I haven't handled, or the cases that we couldn't see, but seems like this is out there, right? So you can find those things when you're dog fooding your product. So those could be like one of the ways to just make sure that you're always in with the product itself. um, all right, so with that said, right, and would just love to know what's happening next on LinkedIn, and then we'll also talk about what does the adaptability of AI on LinkedIn basically looks like how are they sort of picking this up.
Yeah, so I am not allowed to actually share
Okay.
what's happening, but
Sure.
we're doing a lot to help job seekers, especially
Sure.
people on premium plan. I believe in the US, starting with the US, because we still have AI bandwidth problem, to help people like analyze whether they have a fit for a job, to help them see where the gaps are from their profile, like how can they do a better job. We're exploring a lot of that, and we are seeing quite a bit of like good uptick in helping people using AI to, find a better job. There are other use cases that are being used for recruiter, for small business hires, but those are a little bit more B2B focused.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you will have to subscribe actually to our Chief Product Officer, Tomer, has a newsletter about building LinkedIn. I highly encourage you to, subscribe, check it out. I believe he sends it out every 2 weeks or every month. And so there'll be like a full slew of like, what are the products we're shipping and why we're shipping it. Obviously, when we ramp a feature, sometimes it's global, sometimes it's US only before it released to other regions. So I would say yeah, subscribe to that newsletter and stay
Got it,
tuned.
got it. No, but in sense of, let's say, what is the bigger vision as of now? Like, where is LinkedIn heading in general as a social media platform? What does that look like? Maybe if you can,
Yeah,
you
so
know.
internally, LinkedIn is not a social media platform. That's not how
Okay,
we see ourselves. We
okay,
are a knowledge platform that help people, obtain knowledge and find jobs, be more successful at work. Helping more people. They are not just working in tech or finance. So that's why we want to go into like newer segments like healthcare, nurses, manufacturing, even maybe retail, and helping more people, because our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So if we only focus on like impacting, white collar jobs, then it's not every member of the global workforce, right? And we'll continue building out features that help people, find meaning in their career, solve workplace problems. And social media is kind of this, or your network and the community is this foundational element that help us to do that. But we don't want it to really become like a social media platform, even though media calls us that. But internally, we wanted to change that perception.
no, for sure. No, totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And with that said, right, what just to begin with in terms of AI, right? And let's talk about the things that you've written as well. Uh, what is the mental model look like for someone who is into product management and let's say want to like bring in some capabilities to begin with in their product? I mean, some of the basics that goes is like where can the productivity go high with the kind of product that they're building with, or how AI should be looked upon, or like what should, like, at the end of the day the question is, I think, what should be the mental model of, let's say, a PM sort of introducing AI to in their product, and what are some of those learnings that you want to probably share someone of how do they need to think about adopting AI for their product?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So first thing first is that focus on the user problem, right? Again, the jobs to be done framework, the milkshake study, make sure you Google it, because you don't want to have a solution in search of a problem, which is what happened a lot right now, right? With AI, people are like, oh, this is so sexy, so cool. Let's make everything a chatbot, right? Like everything has that magical thing that you click on and it opens up. So make sure you are clear about at least the hypothesis of what you're trying to test. But you talk about a mental model, which, let me see if I can put it on the camera. This framework here that I show, but basically I'll talk through because you can't really read it. There's three factors when it comes to which use cases are best chosen for generative AI. So the book focused on generative AI. It's a new hot thing. So I'll just say there are a lot more other type of AI, but what's unique about generative AI? So the three factors that we're involving are how accurate do you need, the AI to produce the output? Because unlike traditional software product, right, where you are very predictable, you give rules or you set up the things of like how the software will respond. But with AI, it depends on the prompt, depending on the user.
Absolutely.
It can go, you can hallucinate, right? That's the technical term. So you don't have control over the output. You can try to fine tune it to make it more relevant, look more useful, but you don't have 100% of predictability and control. So the first thing is, what are some use cases that does not require a lot of high accuracy? So what are high accuracy use cases? Banking transaction, right? You don't want your money to like all of a sudden disappear.
True.
How to invest your money, right? Writing a super strong executive comm, auto send. Those you probably don't want to auto send, but you might want AI to help you create a draft, for example. So things that have like low frequencies are like, creating the first draft of something, creating an image, creating a children's book, a poet, or having fun, doing that, drafting an email before you hit send. So accuracy is sort of the first dimension. The second dimension is the need for fluency. Like how fluent, how high quality do you want, the AI to be able to write, right? So, like crafting an email or a first draft of PRD, that's pretty high fluency. So that's also a good use case for AI to start. And then the third thing is sort of tangential to like the accuracy, which is like the stake, how risky. So if AI create an output, like how risky is that decision? Like if it's investing your money automatically, that's risky, right? Because money is at stake.
Sure.
If it's sending to your executive or to your customer about a certain thing and advising them to take certain action, that might be high risk. Whereas if it's like just a first draft, just something to jump off, just something to automate a workflow, but humans are still in the loop with control, then that's a good use case. So there's additional factors that come into play, including like, well, like how frequently people are going to use this. Because every transaction, unlike software product where you pay maybe the hosting fee, and then like the margin is super high, right? Serving 10 customer versus 1,000, a million customer. I mean, yes, there's AWS fee for scaling, but those are like the margins are 80-90%. But for AI, every prompt, the back and forth actually costs money. So CPU, until it becomes not a problem, right now there's an economic case to be made, right? So there's like return and invest like costs. Obviously, that's why bigger players now have more leeway because they have more money, whereas smaller startups have to make the math worked out. Also, do you have the right data to enable that experience, right? Or are you just basically a GPT wrapper, right? That does not have moats, because now with custom GPT, there's no need to really download another app that just kind of costs GPT to do a lot of that stuff. So I think as PM, my biggest advice is that go try different new tech, right? Like pay the $20. I don't know if India has that or a different pricing plan, but pay the price to try out different use case, right? Pay it for 1 month or something to get access to it, and try other type of LLM as well, because like Anthropic is pretty good, I heard, Cloud, right? Like, or Bard. Just compare and see like the same prompt, how does each LLM respond? Speaking of lack of predictability, right? So you can really see, do you get better response from some other, other LLM, large language models? So I think in the new age of generative AI, PM just have to be a lot more experimental and iterative. And if you're job seeking, you're a pivoter, hey, ask GPT to write some self intro to help critique your current self intro, right? Be an interviewer, do a little role play. So do those things. And I know that there's some custom GPT for like PM interview as well. So make sure you try it out, because most likely I can very easily see a PM case study being like, how do you design, something for X? And that would probably involve AI, right? So play with the capability, know what it can do. And then with GPT enabling more and more modality, right? DALL-E was generating images. And this past weekend, a lot of viral video about Sora.
Sora,
Yeah, text to video. It's crazy, right? So just think about how would those, be used in some form of your product. Maybe it's not ready right away, but there are some cheaper versions that are ready. So go test it out and see what you get.
No, totally makes sense. I think accuracy has been a problem for everyone, and then eventually, I think selling a trained model is going to be a thing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, no one is going to come for a mediocre AI tool that you just built, but more on where have you trained that data from, or what kind of models that you're bringing in, depending on what sector you are in, what the product basically looks like, right? So I mean, this totally makes sense, and I think these are some of the bigger problems that everyone probably might be dealing with, because even if a customer is coming in, even we say, right, at least that we have some of the models that are trained to understand this particular use case that you are here for, and that's when the conversation at least goes to the next steps. But people are also sort of educated about it now, that okay, I mean, it's not like I'm coming for the wrapper that you have just built out. So that totally makes sense. But just to talk about, let's say, any sort of case study that is one of your favorites, let's say from the book, and maybe you can talk about it over here, like any one of your favorite case studies that you loved writing, or just maybe talking to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of case studies, but one of the best which one? I did so first I want to share a resource for folks. This newsletter called How They Grow gives a lot of really, really in-depth case studies on some of the leading apps. So I definitely encourage you to check out. We feature so I know Jared Herman's the writer for the newsletter, How They Grow. And so I work with him to feature one of his case study. He even write out this iceberg called Depth of Product-Led Iceberg, where he lays out 8 layers of how to create value for a product, and using Canva as an example. In his newsletter, there's a lot more, case studies that kind of do that. But I think it's one of the best framework to think about from, what problem you're solving. So like the job to be done that I keep going back to, milkshake study, make sure you Google it. The second thing you Google is How They Grow, newsletter on Substack. so from that layer down to like what information you'll see when you come, what's your first impression of the product when people come to you? How do they come to you? How do they know you? How do they know you're the right solution for their problem? How are you going to tell them, right? All of those steps being breaking down. What's the friction to try now that they might convince that, oh, okay, I'm interested. So the decision funnel from like awareness to discover you, like, right, the considering you, to eventually trying you and staying and paying, like all of that, it's the onions that you're being peeled out, or the iceberg that goes from the top, the tip of the iceberg, that goes all the way to monetize, potentially build a fan, turn into some sort of referral engine, right? So I think I would strongly encourage reading that. It's a really good case study. In terms of developing AI specifically, I put down some like a lot of little tidbits of case study and applications of how, like, for example, I personally very passionate about the education space. You'll see Poise being this a company that gives you a radar chart of how well you communicate, right, along different dimension around your confidence, your clarity. Are you an inspirational speaker? The empathy, like being able to like record the meeting and like show you that real insight, being a coach almost, is very exciting. I think Duolingo, for example, has an AI role play when you do interviews. I also like those mission driven ones that uses AI to help people with mental health problem. Again, it's a gray zone because if people have suicidal attempts or like really depressed, AI is not at the level of maturity to handle that, right? Absolutely. But little things here and there, like especially for people who are looking for jobs, today it happens even more so. Like I have specific prompts for people to try that out, and a lot of it I want you to try to use it as a role play, right? Build a custom bot of like, here are some of the commonly asked questions. Here are some of the best answer. Now let's role play, and you can role play both ways. You can role play as a interviewee. To answer the question and ask AI to judge your question, right? Giving them the criteria to judge. But you can also play as an interviewer. You can say, here's my resume, here's some of the written answer. Now let's play it back and then see how well your answers look. Or do it with a friend together and see how they would, score your response. So I think, again, I didn't go into like actual product example, but I think those are tidbits that are pretty interesting, and I hope people win the book and check it out. If not, you can go to Kindle and search for my book. I half the price for Indian market, so hopefully it's accessible. And by the way, soon. Amazon takes 70% of the cut. You didn't hear it wrong. So I'm not writing this book to make a shit ton of money, right? So I hope the advice can be shared with more people. That's my goal.
No, for sure. No, totally makes sense. And just to remind everyone, we are going to do a giveaway of this book that Shyvee has written, which is reimagined. So stick here. We're going to announce later, but then one of you will be getting this book that Shyvee is showing as well. All right, so coming back to just like some of the in terms of mindset, mental models we have talked about. What are some of the things that are happening and you need to take care about when you're starting with AI is something that we have talked about. But if you have to like sort of put it in a framework, right? Let's say of like how we have some of these frameworks that are already built. Like for example, in prioritization, we have let's say Moscow. Then just to understand users and what are the journey look like, we have been talking about it as to the job to be done and stuff like that. What are some of the emerging ones that you've seen when people are adopting AI? What are some of those frameworks that you would have seen? And I guess like you have also written it on your book as well, right? Like what are some of those frameworks that someone can take away today as a basic one as well? Like, okay, this is what the background of going from A to B basically looks like in terms of a framework. So
yeah, let me see if I could pull up. It's a great question, and one of the if you ask me to critique my own book, I would say one of the things I wish I do more is to summarize everything into sort of one framework, so that instead of like 20 plus, which is a
Yeah.
lot for people to take in. But one of the big framework that I like to share, let's see if I could share my screen. So I actually really like this 5 building block for working with generative AI in particular. I think, again, I touch into the details in the book, but I think that there's 5 components when you think about building building product with generative AI. The first is some of the foundational product and design principles, meaning very quickly, like you need to solve real world problem, right? Like you shouldn't, again, have the technology in search of a problem. So make sure you serve the needs of the people. You design for transparency and explainability. Like, why is the AI respond certain way? What data goes into it? Implement sort of continuous feedback loop. Balancing automation and control. Keep human in the loop, right? Don't just automate everything. Make sure you have like some way for a human to give input, right? You can create a first iteration. Ask them, how good do you think? Do you want to change this way? Prioritize safety and ethics, which is also another big component in trust framework, which didn't really quite, I mean, it exists for AI, but it's even more so now with generative AI, right? Components around privacy, security, safety. AI trainings are all based on biases, right? Like if there's junk in, then you're going to get junk out. So how do you make sure, it's fair, it's bias free? How can you hold yourself accountable or your team accountable for the product? So there's, and then design with the idea to amplify human potential, right? Not to replace, not making people feel like they're going to lose their job. Yeah. Maybe there's some part of the automation equation that will get into that. Yeah. But your goal should be, right, serve and amplify human, not to replace it. Yeah. There's cost cutting aspect of it, but there's also general, let's do some good. How can human be in the loop, right? And then these green bucket is what I talk about, jobs to be done. That's JBTD. And what are some AI-enabled superpower that are unique to generative AI that traditional AI does not have? So in the book, I outline about 6 of them. But very briefly, it's like they can dynamically create content. They can synthesize knowledge. They can enable this kind of hyper personalization through a chat, because that's never been done before, right? You can have real-time interactivity. You can have some form of workflow automation. There's multi-modality, right? Across text, image, audio, video, code, right? Generation. And then it's democratizing this access to a lot of expertise, right? In the book, I cover things like a prototyping tool. So as a PM, you can create an app by just giving a couple prompts, and it will give you different screens, and you can customize the screen. So you almost, it empowers you to be a designer without texting on a designer, right? It's both scary and exciting. So just take everything with a grain of salt, right? Again, coming back to the trust framework and the principle, how can you amplify human versus replacing them? And there's specific UI UX interaction around AI that we need to think about as well, right? How do people discover this AI experience? Should it be so intrusive that's always there, always nugging you? Or what I really like was today I saw Copilot in Outlook for the first time, trying to help me write my email better, which I really appreciate, because it's kind of like a progressive disclosure. It's like interesting. It's like contextual, right? So the loading states means AI takes a while to stream the output, right? So GPT does a really good framework because it's writing with those words, so you see the magic kind of happening in front of you, even though it takes sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes even longer to load. But it makes it feel shorter because you see the magic flying in front of your eyes. So like in the book, I talk about a LinkedIn example where we help small business create job description, for example, on the fly based on the information they provide. So it takes about, let's say, 60 seconds. So instead of just spinning, making people feel like, is my internet has there some problem? Like, why is it so long? Like, why am I keep waiting? You can educating them,
True.
right? You can say things like, we are aggregating, synthesizing data points from millions of whatever, right? So you educate them. It's that same analogy of like putting a mirror in an elevator.
Oh
Then
yeah,
when you go
absolutely.
up the elevator, you feel shorter because you're looking
Classic
at
example.
yourself.
Yeah.
You're looking like, do I look good? You know, like, or you're paying attention, right? So that kind of little things. How do you collect feedback? How should a conversation flow? Those are all really interesting questions that happen in traditional product management for software, but also even more so in AI because of the hyper personalization. And then last but not least is the prompt that you go
Yeah.
in. There's engineering aspect to it, but there's also a lot of product thoughts, right? What kind of
Yeah.
instruction you should give to the AI? What role should the AI be taking on? How much instruction? And every time you change something, the
Yeah.
output might be all different. So how do you manage that? So the book goes into a lot more detail, but I think these are the five most key building blocks or frameworks to think about building generative AI product.
No, for sure, for sure. I think even like, by the way, I'm a designer turned founder. So I come from a design background primarily. So one of the things always I think about, and I love the point where you have that interaction piece and how you were talking about, there are some moments that happens when was like the software that we were building all this while was literally a lot evolved, and we knew like what are some of the basics that goes around, let's say in terms of loading time and stuff like that. But the kind of data now we are processing out of AI would take time, and like this becomes some of the fundamentals of how you're designing things for AI as well, which totally makes sense. And like some of the times, and I would also love to know from your point of view, is that, for example, there are so many ways to interact with a computer, or let's say as a machine these days, right? And one could be, let's say, interactions in terms of using an actual UI. There could be cases when eventually we are moving towards hardware which is literally just your lenses, and you are like with Vision Pro and things like that, you are getting more connected with humans, natural interaction. And because of AI, it can also come as an assistance. That becomes like another layer of computation that is inside your machine. Uh, what, how, like, do you imagine something like how would the future of interactions with these machines would look like? For me, it is. I feel like there would be a very thin line between, um, like we doing a natural thing and actually AI is around us. Coming, and the starting point is with, let's say, products like Nemo, or like other products that are getting much more smaller computers with your body, right? So
Yeah,
what
like
do you
AI
think?
pin,
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
pin,
AI
right? For
pin, AI
former,
pin, right?
former Google, yeah. Sorry,
Exactly.
not Apple, Apple exact that went out and
Yeah.
built AI pin.
Yeah, there are like a lot of startups also that are coming in, which is just focusing on these nano computing sort of hardware, right? How do you imagine, and this is very hypothetical stuff that I'm asking, but because you are writing about it, like how do you imagine that design world would look like? But I feel like there would be a very thin line, and eventually we will go more natural with the way we are, and then there's some assistance, or as I look at it, is like the seventh sense with you, that will be there, which will be the the second brain that is helping you on a day-to-day life. So how do
Yeah, for
you also
sure.
imagine?
I think that's a great question. We can wrap up on this question. I think
Yeah,
that's a good one
yeah,
to sort of
for sure.
envision.
Yeah,
First of all, in the book, I talk about AI, the symbolics between AI and robotics. I
sure.
see hardware kind of like a robotics, right?
Yeah.
And it's getting to a even faster. Like for years, we saw robotic, but it's mostly
For
like
sure.
iRobot, right? That does
Yeah.
very little things, or like a giant, like the IBM machine that kind of plays chess, and that's all they do. But with because of the natural language learning, robots are learning so much faster now, right? Because they start to understand human language. Not that they understand it's still all math, but it enables them to do that and learn much faster. So I do think they're going to be a lot more hardware, or I would even go beyond hardware. I would think that the movie Her back in 2013 is a US show. It's
Yeah.
like you just talk to the AI. It's this operating system that goes in the background. I think will probably come into life more and more. It will be an interesting conversation about companionship and human relationship.
True.
But I think that we are walking towards that future. Not quite there yet, and then obviously a lot more devices are going to get smarter, more connected, more intelligent, because they have been trained on AI and fine-tuned it by a different AI model. A lot more smaller business that traditionally don't have any AI team, don't know anything about training data, will be able to access AI. Actually, in my recent interview, as of last week, I was talking to a founder that builds some sort of smart hardware for small and medium-sized business, down to construction workers changing pipes in a house. All of those things could be AI smart. Like even when you are shopping, you have any questions about the product, all self-enabled, self-customer service, right? I think there's a lot more of that happening.
Yeah. No, I mean, that totally makes sense, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I feel, yeah, as you said, like we are not that close to, having the world like that, but eventually we are moving towards that. But yeah, with that said, thank you so much for joining this beautiful session. I think there's a ton of things that I have learned, and I'm also taking back with some of these ways of how you think about product management first, which is like which gives me another double check to the things that I believed in, and now you are also saying that, so it felt really good and sort of very relatable. Plus the fact that we went into the depth of how AI world basically looks like, and how the product builders need to look at it. Love the whole conversation, and like, over to you. Like, how did you like it? Like, what do you think about the whole conversation as well?
No, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope people get the book, some of them, or check it out
Absolutely, for sure.
on Kindle. So, and let me
Yeah,
know, reach out to me. I'm
yeah,
always accessible on LinkedIn. Sometimes it takes a while for me to respond, but I'll get to you. And yeah, let me know if you have any feedback or any question. Um, Feel free to reach out.
cool, perfect. Thank you so much for joining in. And with that said, I'll come with the next episode for maybe in the coming weeks. So till then, stay tuned, and thanks for joining. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.